Warm welcome, Mr. Nanda, and over to you. I missed out to record the welcome note, but that is fine. Your session is more
That's okay.
important for us. So,
No,
yes,
thank you, thank you. You make
yeah.
me sound like much more than I am, but thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, we even have a couple of our board members also today in this session. So I see our membership VP is also there here in the attendees list. So I'm glad that the Gujarat chapter is now waiting to know from you. So over to you. I will
No,
stop
thank you.
sharing my screen and you can share your screen.
Okay, so let me know if my screen is visible and looks okay.
Yes, yes, it's very much visible to us.
Okay, great. So thank you for the welcome, and it's my pleasure to be here. I have volunteered many times with PMI chapter when I was with Intel in Bangalore. I used to be invited for keynote or some of the sessions that they would conduct. So yeah, it's something that I really love, and I do it, as part of my volunteering. But thank you for inviting me and having me here. And thank you for the people who have already submitted questions. Most of the questions will be answered or would be part of the presentation, but some that would require additional discussion, I will cover them either during the slides or maybe afterwards. And before we begin, I, as luck would have it, I caught some bad cough and cold yesterday, so there may be moments that I have to pause and have some water or something. So please bear with me. So yeah, let's start. So where the way I want to conduct, or the way I want to talk about the topic, is focus on three diverse areas. And that's why when we were talking about that, how do I conduct this session, because uh, covering the workflows and everything becomes very tactical and becomes very large topic. So the way I'm going to approach it is in three sections. So the first and foremost, I will share what AI is all about. Keep it at a very high level, but give you guys enough information so that when you are talking to somebody, what they are talking, and you will have some meaningful conversation, with your stakeholders, partners, or whoever. The second section is more focused on what I always have called the art of project program management. All of you are experts. You're PMP certified. You have a lot of other credentials that you carry with you. But during my career, I have learned many things, mostly by hit and trial, mostly by getting burnt. And those are things that I captured in one of my books, and I'll talk about, the key lessons I've learned and what I think is more of an art of project and program management than the science. And science, you already are aware of PMP and everything. And then at the last section, I will bring both of these together to talk about where do I see project program management and AI converge. And we'll talk about both managing AI projects and also using AI as a tool, as a PM. And feel free to, post your questions. I will pause at the end of every section and answer any, burning question. Otherwise, we will carry them forward to the tail end of the presentation. And in the interest of time, if I'm not able to answer all of the questions, I will commit to answering them over the email in the post the session. So with that, I'll not spend a lot of time on my intro. You already have heard enough of me, but the only thing I would say is that, there's a saying in Hindi, ki aadmi aur achar mein farak hota hai. And for me, the key thing was that I don't want to be a pickle. So I would always want to, or I always wanted to look at things that I can do and learn, every few years. So and my journey has been totally focused on that. As I grow, and I mature, how can I diversify my skills, my learning? And that also drove me to pivot to AI back in 2018. So, what is artificial intelligence? And interestingly, if somebody would have asked, all of you maybe a year ago, or a year and a half ago, where before the chat GPT splashed on the screen, you would have guessed like 5, 10, 15 years. But it has been around for almost 70 years. And I'll not go through a lot of details, but the artificial intelligence as a term was coined back in 1956. And then, a lot of things happened, but then the key problem happened between 1974 through almost 1997, where we call it AI winter. That means what happened was that nothing was evolving, no new innovation, no major breakthroughs. So the government stopped funding, the industry stopped funding. But then around early 2009, I would say 1999 to 2005 or so, there were two things that happened in the world that actually gave a springboard to artificial intelligence. And if you have not guessed it so far, one was cloud computing, that's compute on demand. Because now, if you want to do something complex, which is, AI is very, very complex, you need a lot of compute powers. And even if want to run some deep learning algorithms, you need server farms. So it was very high capital investment before the cloud computing came on board. And second, and equally important thing that happened in the industry was the rise of social media. So now suddenly there was enough data for the researchers and everybody to create artificial intelligence. So these two became the inflection point, and that is why what you see that after around 2015 or so, there has been very rapid development around AI. And since ChatGPT was introduced back in Q4 of 2022, every day we see something new being introduced in the market. So long history, but very, very interesting. And I would encourage, if anybody's interested in reading about some of these papers. One of the breakthrough paper was backpropagation, which actually gave conceptual ideas to very commonly used learning mechanism, and I'll talk about that. And that also is was one of the things that ChatGPT or OpenAI used to create ChatGPT. So key terms that you should know about, and these are terms that you would hear often, and these are also where you would see people are mostly confused, and they change them interchangeably. But the foundation of all AI is what we call as deep learning. Now, these are complex neural networks that really mimic our human brain. And these are research oriented activities. A lot of people, you would, in a research organization, you will see, or any startup, or even let's say OpenAI, Google, and all that, people who are actually working on deep learning, the underlying foundation of AI. These are PhDs or multi PhDs, primarily mathematics and physics. But also, let's say if you are going to build some algorithms for medical biopharma, then you would need PhD in that particular respective field. So these are complex algorithms. This is not something that you or anybody, even a very seasoned programmer, will not be able. They will be able to do something, but they will not be able to come up with some brand new architecture and all that. So think about that. This is the meat of artificial intelligence. Without the deep learning algorithms, nothing else beyond that, goes forward. And this also would be something challenge that we'll talk about, because there was a question around how AI regulation and these things. So I'll touch upon that again. But think about three layers. Deep learning is the foundation. Machine learning sits on top of that, and we'll talk about that. And and then the artificial intelligence is the overarching application layer that you and I will interact with. Like when you say chatbot is the artificial intelligence. If you say a recommendation engine, that's a AI that actually has been developed on some deep learning algorithm and through some machine learning method. So these, once you're clear about these, then when you're talking, when you're managing a project, then are you managing a deep learning project? Are you managing a machine learning project? Or are you managing the abstract layer of the artificial intelligence? So similar to, are you managing a project that is for mobile versus web app versus construction versus mechanical? So there are some abstract layers and there are some technology layers. So what are the key methods by which we make the machine learn? And the interesting thing about AI and ML is that it sounds very complex, but conceptually it is mimicry of what we are, how we learn, or how we make our children learn. So think about when our children go to school or college, or you are yourself re-enrolling into some class, you are actually doing supervised learning. What is happening is that you are given instructions, and then a school teacher or a professor or somebody is actually supervising your learning and correcting you as you learn. That's exactly what happens when we say supervised learning. This is where the humans will see how the machines are learning from a given pattern, from a given data, from using whatever the underlying deep learning algorithm, and then correcting it as it is learning. On the other hand, unsupervised learning is like you do self-learning. I enroll into a class, or I read magazines or books, or there's no supervision happening, and I am reading everything. I am making my own judgment call. I am testing my own learning by either some tests online or something. So, but nobody is supervising me. The same thing around machines, that using some deep learning algorithms, there are methods by which we can tell the machine to learn itself from the data we throw at it. And I will go a little deep after I go through the definitions. And then the most interesting is reinforcement learning. This is as close to how we learn as possible. Now think about what, as a child, what would happen if you would not be learning correctly. Your report card would come in, and either you would get a slap by your parents, or you would get pat on the back, right? Or this is some kind of punishment. Or so what we call in artificial intelligence is policies for the feedback, either a reward or a punishment. That's what it is called. So the when the machine is learning based on the output it generates, it automatically gives itself either a reward or a punishment based on whether it learned correctly or not. So now that you know the key, fundamental foundational methods of AI learning, so let me talk about where they are used and how. And then on the right, what you see, semi-supervised learning and reinforcement learning from human feedback. These are nothing more than combining the concepts from the other three. And there'll be more that will evolve. So supervised learning primarily is where you already know the answer. So let's say we are going to train a mathematical model, and we already know that 2 plus 2 equal to 4. So we throw multiple different combination of equations at the model, and we ask it to predict what is the answer. So we already know the answer. No, or the typical example that everybody uses, let's say we have 100 pictures of cats and dogs, and we want the model to understand or identify which are cats, which are dogs. We already know each picture. We have already labeled them. This is the cat, this is the dog. So we throw it at the model, and outcomes, it will predict maybe all of them correct, or it may sometimes predict cat as a dog, or vice versa, or maybe something totally different. So that what we do is we feed it back. This is where the supervised learning comes in, and we see, okay, where did the machine go wrong? It may be the algorithm, it may be something else, or the picture may be fuzzy, or anything can happen. So we either correct the data or we fix the algorithm, and then we go through that loop again and again till we get to a point where the learning has stopped. Unsupervised learning, on the other hand, as I said, is because there's humongous amount of data. It is impossible for a human to actually get the hypothesis. So ground truth or hypothesis are two terms that you will hear often, which is, what is the truth that you are seeking. And so in this case, we will let the machine figure out what is the ground truth. Now think about that you want to create a model about predicting house prices, the sale price of the house. So you would feed it tons and tons of data, and it will automatically cluster everything and say, okay, I can predict the house price, and I think the price of the house is dictated by the square footage, the location, the pin code or zip code, um, you know, and so forth. So it will identify few features and say prediction is based on that. Now you can start correcting it, because maybe it is off by many accounts or maybe little bit. Then you can say, no, look at, was the house updated, upgraded, does it have new appliances, or does it have this and that. So essentially what you're doing is, once you let the AI or the machine learning algorithm figure out the ground truth, then you start educating it more and more with new features. And on the reinforcement learning is, like I explained, that the deep learning algorithm will itself keep feedback loop, but then you will on top of it, make sure that the reward and the punishment is appropriate to the correction you want. So you don't want to overcorrect it, and you don't want it to be undercorrected. So this is where the human part comes in developing the AI. The RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback, was actually started by OpenAI. And this was the breakthrough that they got when the chat GPT happened. OpenAI has been around since 2014, 2015. And all their earlier models before ChatGPT came out were a failure. I used to use Google models, and OpenAI. I've been experimenting with their models uh, for my own learning and experimentation, and they were disastrous because they were either using unsupervised learning or supervised learning, and because of the humongous data that they were throwing it at, it was getting to a point where what we call as hallucinations, or the errors that the model would generate, were making them unusable for the target audience that they were targeting. But the moment they introduced RLHF, the quality of ChatGPT and the 3.5 was phenomenal. So, and now this is where the industry is leaning towards RLHF, and they are now also talking about situational awareness, that the new paper has come out, which is very interesting how this will evolve. So, the AI bias is something you all have heard. We all have heard. This is different from, I will talk about a technical term called model bias, but this is something that will not go away. Almost everybody is saying that, hey, we will reduce bias, we'll bring it to zero. But there is a fundamental thing we have to understand, that all of AI is being trained on data or information generated by us humans. We are biased. There is no human being on this earth that can say that I am unbiased. So, whatever bias is, whether it is little bias or huge bias or whatever it is carried into the data. When I write a tweet, when I write an article, when I read a book or write a book, it carries the biases that I have. You read a newspaper article, the judgment you make is based on the biases you have. And if you are going to explain something to somebody, that information will carry the biases you have. So, because all the data that is used for training the AI is generated by humans, so there is no way we will ever have any AI that is not biased. And bias means social biases. I'm not talking about the technical bias that I will touch upon later on. And these are serious issues that actually get into the governance side of it. There was one question around, will AI be regulated? And personally, I don't want it to be regulated, but if we are going to regulate something, then it should be that disclosure of the data used for training the model, disclosure of the source of the data, that would be another one, disclosure of the identified biases in the data would be. So there are things that I would say, if we are going to see some regulation and governance around AI, it should be around the data and the models and the sources. And AI governance is going to be a very important part of project and program management portfolio. And we will talk about that, in the third section. So understanding AI governance would be very important for all of us, and especially for PMs, because this is where I think the skills will be very, very relevant over long term. So there is a couple of things that, as you are managing or you are going to manage AI, projects, there are few things that you can do to make sure that the project is successful. There are two things I highly recommend. One is that always keep a human in the loop. So what that means is that throughout your project, and there was another question that somebody had asked about the, quality auditor or QA and all that. So that's where governance and some of these things will come in. So you have human in the loop, both in the beginning of the project and the tail end and throughout. So that is where you can actually address some of the biases that you will encounter. The other thing you can also think about is, can you have an AI generate data for training another AI? But there are risks in that, but at least you will be able to address some of the biases in the system. But this is something that you have to be very clear about, that as long as the data is from any source that is human generated, even news articles, even I would say code that somebody has written, or even research papers, all of that carry human biases, and that gets into the AI that we train. At the underlying level or foundation level, AI is predictive. And the I have a child, like I have, a hard one when people talk about predictive versus generative AI, because generative AI became as a term very popular with ChatGPT. But that is also predictive. It is predicting the next token that you would see. When you are typing and you see the auto fill, you're typing half the word and it shows the rest of the word or the next word. That is generative AI. It is predictions. But what has happened in the last 1 year, and I'm seeing this solidify, is that people or even the industry experts have started separating the predictive versus generative AI. And what they call about predictive is that anything that has to do with identifying patterns, trends, or somebody focusing on, let's say, prediction of the stock market or something that is, based on the previous behavior to the future behavior, they call it predictions. And on the generative side, they started talking about that something generated that, new content. So writing a joke, writing a poem, or generating these, the memes and all that. So so they started to classify them separately, but the underlying is both predictive. Whether you're predicting trends or you're predicting the next token or you're predicting a poem, all that is, predictions. And because now the industry has started bifurcating them, you are also seeing the applications riding on top of them. So RPA, robotic process automation, which is, earlier form of AI, uh, is now part of predictive. The rule-based conversational AI. So the chatbots that we are used to are now classified as predictive. On the other hand, the sentiment analysis, summarization, so some of these new things that are coming out, which were not possible earlier, or they were possible, but in a very limited fashion, are becoming part of the or being called out as generative AI. So I would say this is a surface level difference. Underlying, it's the same. So there are four levels of artificial intelligence. We all have seen the first one. You go to YouTube, we like a video, and suddenly the feed is filled with the same kind of videos. You go to Netflix, you like a movie, and suddenly it will start showing you similar movies. So this is the simplest form of AI. Now, when I say simplest form, it doesn't mean that it's very simple to code, and this is still artificial intelligence. It is still very complex. It is based on a lot of mathematical formulas and all that. So it is relatively simple compared to the other artificial intelligence. So don't assume that it is simple and I can hire a college grad and tell the person to write a recommendation engine. So all the recommendation engines are reactive AI. They don't learn. What that means is they're not learning about the patterns and everything. All they're doing is reacting to how you as a user are interfacing with that platform. So Amazon, when you like something or when you buy a product, it automatically shows related products. That's a recommendation. That very, very early form of recommendation engine. They were one of the pioneers in that. Netflix was pioneer in that. So the recommendation engines have been here around for more than 20 years. Very early form of AI. Um, but they're always limited to a specific tasks. If you go to your Google or Gmail or email account, suddenly you see it filters automatically all the um, spam mail. That's reactive AI because you must have clicked on something and pulled into spam, and very easy to fool. You pull two emails from spam to your inbox. The next time around, you will see that it will not put them in spam. So that's why it's reactive. Limited. That's now the next one is limited memory AI. It's a step forward, but huge step forward. This is where a lot of the autonomous driving is using this form of AI. And why they call it limited memory is that while you are using it, that means when you're driving the car, at that time, it does not store anything other than your personal interaction with the car. It is not storing anything that the pattern of the traffic it sees or the object it observes and all that. And there's a reason behind it, because the pattern will change every second, every 5 minutes. You go to your office in the morning every day, although it is the traffic appears very similar, but it is not the same. So there is no use keeping that information. If you are live in Bay Area or you visit Bay Area, you would see a lot of these other cars which are called learning cars with all the radars and everything on their around the body and everything. So they are the ones that are learning the driving. And that software, once the artificial intelligence engine gets built, that is ported into the Teslas or Ford or whatever autonomous car that you would buy. So that's why it is called limited memory AI. Huge benefit. It is getting into the security. You pass through airports nowadays. So there's all these cameras that are there that are actually doing facial recognition, but that's mostly limited memory AI because it is only analyzing the pattern at that given moment in time, but it is not learning from it. It is simply analyzing it. While there's a separate AI behind the scenes that actually is used for learning, that you would never see, that will not be out in the market, like visible to a consumer or a user. The third is where the interesting things start happening: theory of mind AI. So this is where the debate has started begin. The lot of people are talking about Chat GPT being sentient. That means like intelligent, human conscious. I have my opinion. We can always discuss that in the sidelines. But the this is where the things have started to become where we humans will not be able to differentiate between am I talking to a human being or am I talking to a AI. This was also part of the Turing test. So this is where the Alan Turing, who was considered as the father of the AI, and you know he had a test that the day you would not be able to differentiate between the response, whether the response is by a human being versus from an AI, is where we say it is sentient. So we are almost there. A lot of people will claim that Chat GPT or the Llama 3 or the new models that have come out by Facebook, Google, and OpenAI are sentient. I don't think so. We may get there in our lifetime, but I'll be very doubtful. I think that we will stop somewhere in the upper layer of theory of mind AI. And the final is self-aware AI, where the machines are humans. So I think it is still in the realm of science fiction, and I will be very, very surprised if we ever get there. But a lot of research, scientific papers have been written that we may get there in 20 years or 10 years, but I already know I'll see it when we get there. I have lived long enough and seen the technology industry, up close and personal. So a lot of promises, but theory of mind AI is very interesting, and this is where I think where both as PMs and individuals you can start learning how to work with AI. Now, as I said, that AI has been around. It's not something brand new. Earlier, what was happening is that it was very focused on specific tasks, and it has been around everywhere. Now, when you swipe your credit card, the Visa, MasterCard, or whatever card you use, the transaction is actually sent to the artificial intelligence of that company, and within 3 seconds, it will identify whether this transaction is valid or is it fraudulent. So think about the power behind it. Today, in the healthcare, we have artificial intelligence that can actually tell you how the disease is going to progress. Or what is the side effect of a drug on a particular individual. So think about precision medicine. Think about the cost of the drug development. Today, what happened, in earlier days or even today, the big pharma, they test on clinical trials and suddenly, they introduce a drug to the market, but they don't do, they cannot do test on across all various kind of human beings around the world. So they take samples, but they unfortunately they're very small sample. That's why we have side effects. A medicine may work on me, but not on you or somebody else. You may have a different side effect. I may have a different side effect. But with AI in healthcare, all that can go away. A pill can be created that is just for me or people like me with no side effect and so forth. So I'm not going to go deep into marketing, customer support, and all that. But we have been using parts and bits and pieces of this, and some of these are what you call as, there was another question related to this narrow AI. This is where, for example, AI created for trading cannot cannot be used for image analysis, cannot be used for recommendation engine. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, is when the same AI model or deep learning algorithm or the method, the same AI solution can be applied across multiple domains. That's the difference between artificial narrow intelligence versus artificial general intelligence. So I would say that, for content creation, ChatGPT is an AGI, but it is still within content generation. It will not do robot trading for you. It will not do image analysis for you. It may a little bit, but cannot be, right. So that is where the pursuit of AGI is happening, where we want to create artificial general intelligence. So questions around this. I think, there were two questions around it. I have answered, I hope, both of them. Are there any questions that need to be answered right now, or can we wait?
So, sir, one question from my side. Hello.
Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, sir, my skill set is basically in the quality assurance and quality auditing.
Hmm.
So it's like a subset, or I would say not completely into the project management. So when it comes to the artificial intelligence and all, so when I say quality assurance and the quality audits, it's not related with the testing, sir. It's
Yeah.
more on the process, Six
Yes.
Sigma, then
Yes.
auditing,
Yes.
ISO, and yeah,
CMMI. Yes.
CMMI and all, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how, so considering this AI into the picture, so these are actually the non-technical skill sets and all. So how is
Correct.
it maybe as an individual, how can I survive in the industry considering a
Yeah.
non-technical person and this AI coming into the picture, which is
Yeah.
bringing more automation into the
Yeah.
place. And when it comes to the auditing and all, so these are kind of repetitive activities, which I believe somewhere this AI can. So how can I just move my career, or
Yeah.
can I stay in the same? Yes, sir. Sorry, you were saying
We'll talk.
something.
No, we'll talk about it. I have the question in front of me. I will talk about it in
Sure.
the third section.
Sure, sir. Thanks for that.
Y-
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can call me
I
Rajiv.
would, yeah, I would request
Yes,
audience that we have a dedicated Q&A session. Miss Anita Upadhyay is going to take it forward. So let us keep the questions for the end, so we get the content, the insights which
Yeah.
we need from Mr. Nanda. So let us let him speak. We want to hear you more and
No,
more,
if
Mr.
there is,
Nanda.
yeah.
So
So yes, if there is a burning question for that
yeah,
section, the section I covered. The
yes.
other thing I would say is put your question in the chat, no, in the chat
Chat
channel.
window.
That
Yes,
way,
yes. Yes.
somebody will capture it and then we'll talk
Yeah,
about it later
yeah.
on. Yes.
So we would keep, yeah, to the audience, it's a honest request to you that put your questions. I have just messaged, put your questions in the chat window, and Miss Anita Upadhyay would be taking it during the Q&A session. So we will be collecting it from the chat window, and definitely as much questions we can answer, we will try. We have a dedicated 30-minute session for it. So please put your questions in chat window. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, over to you, Mr. Nanda.
But yeah, no problem. So, so moving on to the next section, project and program management, the art and behind it. Um, so there's a plug to my book. The reason I am plugging it here is so I used to teach a lot of my career of 35 odd years. I would say more than half of the time I have been project and program manager. So, and I have also created PMOs and managed PMOs. So my experience has been from ground up. And I used to teach soft skills at Intel as part of my, because at Intel we had at after a particular level you were expected to contribute to learning of the organization. So I used to teach middle management classes, leadership classes, and soft skills. So a lot of my learnings have been captured in the book, which I'm going to talk about, touch upon, because this is the difference between being a PM, PM, a certified PM, versus actually managing and making an impact in your project and programs. So there will be some bits and bytes that you will see here, and the lot of things are taken from the book that I have written on these topics. So here's I start with the uncomfortable truth, and this has been my learning throughout my career being a PM, both in startups and big companies. So although project management is pivotal to success, but yet it is the most underappreciated role in corporate. I have yet to come across or meet managers or leaders who would encourage project and program management discipline in their organization. The technologists hate us, the management, they hate us, and the leadership is stuck in between. They cannot convince either of them. Why? Because we actually make things, we get things done. And whoever gets things done is always the villain. Because I used to call that at Intel I would say the task of project and program managers to herd the cats. And if you have ever managed cats, they cannot be herded together. Dogs can be, but not cats. So I start with this. This is uncomfortable truth. Now, once you align yourself that yes, this is the truth, my job is to make sure that I get things done no matter how you feel or somebody else feels, because your job is to, or your motivation is the success of the project and the program. So once you understand this fact, then everything becomes noise. Then you can focus on how to manage your project and program. And why I call it science and the art? What are the things I consider as art are mostly the key soft skills that I have actually learned, and I have a lot of history and the stories behind them. And what is science? Is you get PMP certified, CMI certified, Six Sigma certification, and all that. So those are. I'm not saying that there's not art in there. There is, but the differentiation between you and somebody else who has the same certificate is maybe incremental. But where you master the art of program project management, suddenly that differentiator becomes humongous. And I'll talk about this in the the last segment. where I talk about the future of what a PM should do. Where non-technical, because most of the PMs are non-technical, and this is where the challenge is, and this is where also the opportunity is. So we'll talk about that. But the key soft skills that I have seen in my experience that differentiated me from many other projects and program managers was these five skills that I teach, and I've also written about them in my book. And we'll talk about these in these slides. So let's start with the stakeholder management, or actually before we go there, and why do I consider the soft skills as more critical, or the science or art behind it. See, as the career progresses, as you rise in the ranks, what happens is that the hard skills matter less. They still they do matter, but they matter less. What matters more is how will you manage your stakeholders, how you communicate, how you network, how you influence. Some of these critical skills will start mattering more, and will also start creating more differentiator. If you look at any of your own, let's say, whichever company you work with, or your own peer circle, the people who will be rising faster would be the people who actually have honed onto soft skills, some or the other, or maybe combination of them. But they still have hard skills so that nobody can fool them and lie to them. So that's why it always starts with hard skills. And this is why, even though you are a non-technical PM, or a lot of PMs start that journey, it is good to actually understand technology. You don't need to be a programmer, or a scientist, but to understand the technology, like the things that I talked about in the previous section. That is good enough. You understand the language, you can have a conversation, you can understand the pain point. That's all is required. So enough hard skills, and grow your soft skills, and you will see, a better results in your career progression. That's why the science, art is built on top of that, the science of the project management. To start with stakeholder management, mostly, and this is where I learned very early in my career, when I was managing one of the projects. And everybody would say that, go to the sponsor, make sure sponsor is aligned, go to the key stakeholders, make sure they're aligned. But most of the people that I was talking to had vested interest in the success of the project. Why? Because either they had pitched for it, or they had, put in money, budget, or whatever. But I learned very early on that I have to equally pay important attention and importance to the stakeholders who have vested interest in failure of my project. And this was something that was a very pivotal in learning. And I'm very fortunate that I got this learning very early in the career, because that actually taught me a 360-degree mapping of my stakeholders, not just focused on who is successful, whose success rides on the success of my project or program. So that's why on the right hand side, when I say corporate hierarchy is not your stakeholder map, that means that don't just look at your manager and peers and your subordinates or whatever, in the corporate hierarchy, and then say, okay, I'm going to only talk to these 5 people. No, you have to look across the organization, and you have to then decide, or actually find out, if not decide, either through your manager or through sponsor, that who are the people who would not want to see this project succeed. they should be part of your stakeholder management. Apart from obviously the usual one that your sponsor and the people who have vested interest in the success. And your strategy to manage both sets of stakeholder would be different. People who want your success, you want to make sure you work with them to bounce off ideas, to share the challenges, alert them of any issues that you are seeing, risks and mitigation, ask them about mitigation. So there should be what I call as no surprise policy towards the stakeholders that are vested in success of your project or program. So you should be the first one they should hear from of any impediments, of any risks, of any challenges, or anything. So focus on that. Your strategy around the people or stakeholders who would want your project to fail should be very different. There, you would talk about making sure that you do not share a lot of nitty gritty details to give them food for rumors or anything, like preempting anything that you are taking. So because when you're executing on the project and program, a lot of things happen on a daily basis. So you want to make sure you're not inviting them into the kitchen to see how the meal is being cooked, kind of a thing. And then your strategy with your manager, who is one of the most critical stakeholders you have, should be totally different. So think about three things: your manager as a stakeholder, the stakeholders who are vested interest in your success, and stakeholders their vested interest in your failure, and have a strategy around all three segments. Other important thing or skill, soft skill, networking. Again, your connections are not your network. And networking is more than having a cup of coffee or a drink together. So think about the purpose of networking. Who should be part of what network? You will need more than one network. You may have one network for your communication channel. You may have one in network for your influencing. You may have one network for misinformation or things like that. So there's more than one network, and you will have to think in your mind, how you manage all that networks. But the key thing here too is that two things I have seen go a long way. One is building relationships, knowing people as they are, who they are, not just a picture on a off chart or somewhere. And you will see you will build very strong network the moment you start building relationships. Transparency and trust definitely go a long way. So transparency and trust means that even if, let's say, you are building a relationship with somebody just because you want their help in success of a project or a program, be transparent. Hey, you are one of my critical stakeholder, or I would like to have better relationship with you because I can learn from you, or I can use you as a bouncing board for bouncing of ideas. So whatever transparency and to build that trust and relationships. Never use your network for trading. Trading means that I do you a favor, you do me a favor. There's no ledger happening anywhere. You may have to give to your network many years before you can reap that reward. So think about your saving in investment, and suddenly there comes a point where you have a very solid network that will actually help you get things done. So hyper networking is another thing where even if you don't have to gain anything from two people, but you can connect both of them and make both of them successful is hyper networking. Some people call it super networkers, but hyper networking is also very commonly used. Be a hyper networker. Don't just focus on getting yourself something out for yourself. Focus on how you build the network and how you manage them. Very important skill. You know, introverts like me, I had very tough time. Even today, I have very tough time networking, but I do it very consciously whenever I do it. Communications. So this is very interesting because most of the time, when somebody gives a feedback, and I have gotten this feedback all throughout my life that, you know, improve your communication. The first thing that comes to your mind is, is my accent bad? Is my English bad? What is bad? So So here's a story I have to tell you that my younger sister, she lives in Australia, and she was traveling, and as she got seated in her seat, the woman next to her started talking, and the woman suddenly said, "Hey, you have an accent," and my sister responded, "Don't we all?" Which is very true. Americans have American accent, Europeans have European accent, Indians have 20 different accents. For English, even for Hindi, we have different accents. So accent is not a problem in communication. What I learned when I moved to US, or actually when I first came here, is English as a language is spoken slowly. हम हिंदी में बहुत तेज बात करते हैं. So when I came to US and I would speak English in the same pace that I speak Hindi, people would get confused. Now I am at a practice where you see me, you hear me speak English. I am speaking at the pace that English is usually spoken at. So there is less problem of accent, more problem of how we speak. And there, communication is much more complex. I talk about very deep into the, in my book, but the key things that I want you to take away from here is one, you as the originator or sender of a message have the responsibility to make it as simple and as clear as possible. Don't throw it, don't throw the burden of understanding on your receiver. So that's one. Second, wherever possible, use less words. Use more picture, visual, video, whatever. We have, as human beings, retain more information that is seen than what is heard or than what is read. So that is how the sequence goes. I read a book, I will retain 0.01% of that book over the course of, let's say, 3 months. I listen to a music or I listen to a podcast, I will retain 20 or maybe 30% of that over the course of 3, 6 months. I watch a movie or a video, I will retain that more than 70% over the course of the same time period. So that's the power of visual style of communicating. Presenting. This is something that I would highly recommend to all the people who want to actually shine as project and program managers. This, when I learned it, really set me apart from many others. But in 1997 or 1998, I was working with a small consulting company, and I was positioned at Intel as a consultant. My basic nature is very introvert. So, so my manager, he said, "Hey, Rajiv, Microsoft at that time used to conduct these sessions around, how to present." So he enrolled me into that. So I went down to LA for that week, and the first session they did, they would videograph everybody doing their very first talk. The first session was only that all of us, we were around 30 people, each of us went onto the stage and we just talked something funny about ourselves. Now I stand up on the stage and give my 3 minute funny talk, and I'm chuckling inside. I'm very happy and all that. I walked down and I talked to my friend who was sitting literally on the first row, and I said, "Okay, how was it?" And he said, "We couldn't hear what you said." I brought that video home, and my wife and she looked. I said, what was happening? From there, my journey to where I'm today, I'm presenting to all of you. I have been keynote speaker at many conferences. It was a very tedious journey. I had to practice and practice and practice and correct myself and all that. But there are few rules that I have captured here. 3 or 4 rules, not very complex. So one, presenting slide deck is not the presentation. You are the presentation. So what that means is that you make sure that you are prepared to talk about the data, to talk about the slides, or whatever the topic is. Second, prepare for the audience. You are not there to impress anybody with your life history. You are there to talk about a topic and just prepare for the audience and the topic. No information overload. This is where I have seen a lot of presentations go wrong. That too much crammed onto the slides or the presentation, and people get confused. So this 7 by 7, or I prefer 5 by 5 rule. That means no more than 7 bullets and no more than 7 words in a bullet. Why? Because you are the presentation, not the slide. And more picture, less words. You stick to these 3 5 and practice. I can guarantee that you will see that your audience are more engaged, they get more value of the presentation, and they see you as a very good presenter. Now, influencing is very complex, and I don't want to undermine it by just saying that that talk to few people and get things done or all that. This actually is a combination of multiple skills and the skills that I already talked about. You have to be very good at networking to influence. You have to be very good at communication to influence. You have to be very good at presentations to influence, and so forth. But this is one skill that has the largest impact than any other skill. A good influencer will have even a bigger impact than the authority, even the CEO. And most of the influencers are hidden. You will not see them in the limelight. So political leaders and all the CEOs and all that, they are the limelight. But the influencers are behind the scene who are influencing what they say, what they do, how if you're CEO, then know how the policies around the organization, the direction of the company, and all that. So this is one of the most powerful skill that project program managers can evolve, and I would highly recommend. It's something you can learn. I have myself grown uh, a lot. I used to be considered very good influencer within Intel, within my division IT, and and I have been teaching this class for many years. One of the most highly rated class I taught, and people would always keep coming to me that I should teach this again and again. Although I got sick of it at the end of it, too many requests. But a couple of things. One, there's a direct influence and there's an indirect influence. and you have to choose with every with every situation, do you want to do an indirect influence or indirect influence? Influence is more about alignment rather than agreement. So what's the difference? Let's say we want to, five of your friends want to go to Goa, right? So to have a good time. Now that's alignment that we want to Goa for party. How you go there, somebody flies, somebody takes a train, somebody does that. Those those are agreements. Somebody, you don't need to agree on everything to be aligned. You need to be aligned, but you may take diverse routes towards that goal. As long as everybody's having fun in Goa, that's the alignment. And influencing strategy is very complex. You don't assume that you will be able to be good at it in the first shot. So you'll have to keep practicing. And I write very detailed strategy, how to evolve the strategy in the book. Or if anybody is interested, I will be happy to coach them, mentor them. I do this all the time. Uh, but this is something I would say would set you apart from other PMs. So I pause here.
Dear attendee, I would request you to keep your mic on mute and please put your question in the chat window. Anita, would you like to take up some questions from the chat? I see 2, 3 are there.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions so far.
Sure.
They are related to the topic we just covered. So one question is related to stakeholders. How do we identify the stakeholders who are not interested in the success of our project?
Very interesting question.
True.
So, see, frankly, there is no one way of identifying that. But there are hints because we as people would not show our emotions or our hatred of anything. We try to be very, at least in the in the corporate, right? So, the way you want to look at it is who will not benefit from your, or actually, let's say there are competing projects, right? And there always are. So which project or program will be cut or effort will lose the funding if your project becomes successful? So that will give you some hint. And this is where networking becomes very important. You will always hear through your grapevine, through the network, who is bad mouthing your project. Anybody bad mouthing your project is another one, another hint. But where I actually found how I actually learned it was whenever I would go and do a status update on a project, I would always see a couple of people catching on to small little things and doing a rattle on that. So what that means is that I would say, let's say I'm giving a risk, update on my project and say, I'm seeing this risk coming, so nothing to be bothered about it yet, but I'm just pre-alerting. I was a young PM at that time. I didn't even know how to actually present some of these things, and I would blurt out these, information with the expectation that my intent is pure. So why not share with everybody? And I would observe that a couple of people would always immediately latch onto that and would start building that narrative. Oh, that means you don't have it under control. Oh, that means that something is wrong. So focus on people who are always questioning in open forums where more than you and other people are involved. They will never criticize you or your project or your presentation in private, but they will always critique it in public. So these are 3, 4 things that I have observed, but there are many. But I think this should give you enough hints. Any other question?
Yeah, there is another question. In fact, a bundle of questions on the same topic, which is very interesting topic as well. which is influencing. So a couple of questions in that is, how do you learn this art of influencing, and what influencing strategies can be deployed in the routine course of project execution and management?
Yeah, it's a very that would literally take another 2 hours, 3 hour session. The class I used to teach was an 8 hour class. So I wish I could cover all the details. I talk about this in detail in my book, but a few things. So there are four things that you have to worry about when you are developing the influencing strategy. One is, the first and important is the situation. That what are you trying to influence? So you analyze the situation. You see that, hey, I'm going to my as a PM, my job is to influence success, to align everybody to the success of this, and this is I'm going to influence across my stakeholders and the people who are against me and all that. So that's the influencing. You understand the situation. The first, that what is the situation you want to analyze. Second, you need to analyze what is the history and what is the context of the others. Because a lot of times where I have seen that I got blindsided is that I got into this project and program which I thought was very cool, very good. This was something that I really wanted to do and is very strategic, visible. But I didn't realize that similar effort was done by somebody else and they had failed. And they are carrying that baggage with them, although they are part of my program team. So essentially, what that means is that I did not understand the context of the program, the history behind it, and the history of the people behind it. So understand their context. What do they bring to the situation? Third, what is that I bring? I have my own preset notions. I have my experience. I have my ideas. But where am I assuming everything? What am I assuming? Is that assumption based on some facts? Or is that assumption something based on somebody is saying something to me? Somebody comes and say, "Hey, Rajiv, you are fantastic. That presentation you did was phenomenal." I'm saying, "Okay, what was phenomenal about it?" And the person would not respond or would not articulate what was phenomenal about it. So what that meant, that feedback didn't mean anything. And if I, take that and I start pumping myself up, then I'm going to fail. So what are the assumptions, presumptions, my own, I would say, traits I'm bringing to the table. The fourth is that if things go wrong, how I am going to distance between the strategy and me as a person. So you have to understand this is very critical, and I'll take 30 seconds to explain it. See, typically what happens is that we get very attached to what we do because that becomes part of our identity. And what happens is that if the project is going sideways, we still latch onto it. Oh, this is my project, my program, this. But what happens is you don't understand. The more you attach yourself to the project or program, if it fails, your name goes with that. You may have built your credibility over 10, 20 years, 30 years. But just because you were so attached to the project or program and you did not distance yourself from that project, you lost your credibility, your standing because the project failed. And I have suffered that multiple times. But because I was in the, I learned and recovered from it. But that was something that I have seen that, and the risk becomes higher and higher as you grow on. I have seen senior VPs and Intel losing their job because they did not realize when to distance from the project or the program you're running. So that distancing strategy is part of your influencing strategy. That when do you start distancing yourself from the project? that this is happening, but it is not me that is being impacted. So I'm doing everything I can do to make it successful, but failure or success of the project is not just me, it is everybody else. So these are four things I will say, but I talk about much deeper, in my book. There's a chapter devoted to influencing in that book.
There are few more questions, but I suggest we take them in the
Yeah,
Q&A session and allow
yes,
him to complete the rest of his presentation. So
sure.
yes,
Yes, makes sense.
Rajesh sir, you can continue, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the before I, let me go back. Sorry. So I'm breaking it into two things. One, because I know for sure that sooner or later, a lot of you who are in high tech industry, and maybe not even high tech, even others, because ultimately all the industry will start doing their own AI projects. So one, I want to walk you through the process of AI development so that you get some hang of, okay, what's so different about it. And then second, I will talk about how can you use AI as a tool. And then the last, and within that, I answer some of the questions that were shared with me and were asked that if you're a non-technical person and QA or quality audit and all audit, all those things. So we'll talk about that. So first, we'll talk about the AI, what they call is, and or I call it MDLC or AIDLC, AI Development Lifecycle, and talk about some of key important things that you should learn and understand. So if you want to understand the how AI gets developed, this is I'm talking. If you remember, I talked about the DLs, the deep learning algorithms, and then the second layer was the machine learning. So what I'm talking about the machine learning, because I don't think that unless you are part of an organization that is actually developing or doing research for DLs, you would, then you won't be here. This presentation is useless to you. But mostly, I would say that the PMs would get involved in a typical corporation and organizations, ML and above. So somebody wants to build a machine learning model for, let's say, HR, for construction, for the manufacturing shop, or things like inventory management, or whatever line of business that you are working in. So if I break the entire life cycle discretely, I would say the top part is what we call as data science, mostly data science, hypothesis and data science. This is where you identify the problem you want to solve. Then you start identifying where are you going to get the raw data from. So let's say you are going to build an AI model for HR, for recruitment, even within HR recruitment. So you'll say, I want to build a model for recruitment, and that can be for any industry. It doesn't really matter. And the model should be able to, sift through thousands of resumes that come in, people apply for job, identify, shortlist, summarize, and tell us which are the best fit candidates for this job for our company. Right. So this is the problem statement you are trying to solve. Now, where is the raw data? There are two places or multiple places. One obviously is that you have your own HR database where you can say, we have 10, 20, 30 years of raw data that all the people who have applied, we will use that. Okay, I don't know why this keeps going forward. So you identify the sources. And then you create the data. That means you clean it up, make sure it is machine readable and all that. So this is all the data preparation, data science activity. And the second part of that is where you start developing the model. This is where you identify, are we going to use unsupervised learning? Are we going to use RLHF? Are we going to use supervised learning? So what kind of learning mechanism we are going to use? And then you go through the development, selection, model testing. So very, very iterative process. And as a PM, you would be expected to manage all of this. And there are challenges because AI development is not typical of any other software development or any other typical project or program. It's very, very iterative, and I'll show that in the next couple of slides. But now, because it is an evolving field, governance is very, very important. So this is where I would say, and that I said earlier, as PM and the PMO would play a very pivotal role in this. So I break this down into a little more detail so that you understand, the some of the key points that will be required. And why I'm walking you through this is you'll understand at the last slide when I talk about how as a PM you can still stay relevant when as AI starts taking more and more automation, bring in more and more automation. Because once you understand how AI is done, then you'll be able to manage not just the AI projects, but also using AI for your benefit. So, talk about the problem. What problem are you trying to solve? Where are the data? What is how much data we can get? Because understand, a lot of times, even in my current organization, I know I'm, head of AI practice for, a consulting organization. And, a lot of people come to me and say, hey, we have these 20 documents. Can we build a model on that? I said, no, 10 to 20 documents will not do anything. If you really want to build some AI model, you need, at least thousands and thousands of, data sets. So raw data, where is the data coming from? What are the sources? Is there bias in those sources? If yes, how are we going to take out that bias? How are we going to clean that, and label the data set and all that? So all of that has to be managed as part of the project. Then are we going to use pre-trained model like Gemini that Google has, or ChatGPT that OpenAI has, or the Meta or Facebook has launched Llama 3 and Llama models. So which model are we going to use? How are we going to test it? This is where some of these things will come in. The quality assurance and the quality audits will start you know expanding into this model testing. How do you make sure that the hallucinations you must have heard the term hallucinations, that is the model hallucinating. So these will become a very critical part of your project and program management, specifically if you are going to manage AI projects. If you're not going to manage AI projects and you are using AI, then these will give you insight into, you can ask, hey, you can ask the manager or the organization that, hey, you are saying I can use ChatGPT as a co-pilot or Microsoft as a co-pilot, but please confirm that it has been trained on the type of data for the project I'm managing. If you are going to work in construction business or you're managing a construction project, make sure that you can ask that question, hey, is the model trained on construction data? Has it seen the blueprints? Can it recognize blueprints? The moment you say that, people will know that you understand how AI is done and what are the challenges of using AI. Because AI will spit out a question answer based on whatever it has thought, and you will have no reason to believe it incorrect because you have not asked the right question. So that's why I'm explaining some of the nitty-gritty details for you. And if you're managing the AI projects, I've tried to fit into waterfall or agile, but it doesn't fit anywhere. Because every step of the way, it's like, I would say it's more like a snake and ladder. You may think that everything is progressing well, but suddenly you find some problem at let's say at model testing and you have to jump all the way back to, hey, there was something wrong in the data. So this is why I call it very iterative process. I hope this gives you an insight into how AI gets developed so that tomorrow if you have to manage it, you have to understand the how to ask the right questions. You can, I'm sure that there'll be video or some access you will have after the session. You can always come back to these slides and say, let me go back to the management and make sure that I ask them, hey, you're saying that I should use Microsoft Copilot for this, but can you please tell me, you know, how was the model tested on this data set or things like that, right? So that you don't get blindsided. Few other technical terms, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I want you to go back maybe in your free time, read about them, because these will actually help you have a very valid conversation and challenge some of the team members very effectively. Data splits, very important. They impact overall AI model quality. In simple terms, it is that if you have 100 records or 100, like I took the example of the resumes. Let's say you have 100 resumes. How do you split between the training, model training? How will you train the model? You take 6, 20, 20, or six, whatever that, 80% for training, 20 for validation, 20 for testing, and they are mutually exclusive. The only key thumb rule is that your validation data set size and your testing data set size should be same. The other rule that you have to make sure is that the data set in all three, training, validation, testing, should be similar. Not like, don't take 1 to 7 and 1 to 8 and then 2 and 2, something like that. Underfitting and overfitting are two common words that you will hear, especially when technical team is talking about it. All it means is that the model performs better on training data set versus model performs outside of training data set. So in simple terms, if let's say you have a student in the class and is a rote student, typically we all are, we focus on roting, and we will be, we will be uh, very accurate as long as the question is within the syllabus. But if anything comes out of the syllabus, you will perform very badly. So that's the difference between underfitting and overfitting. Read these definitions, you will understand them more. And earlier we talked about social bias or AI bias. Here I'm talking about the model bias. This is when the AI model is developed or trained. So how accurate it is. So this is, and variance is how frequently it is erroneous. So think about very simple terms. Let's say we have an AI model that is distinguishing between cats and dogs. We have 100 pictures, 50 cats, 50 dogs. Most of the time, the model predicts 45 to 48 pictures correctly. Most of the time. So that means the model has good bias. That means it can identify, predict very accurately. But now you think about that one time you show it 100 pictures, first time it predicts 90% accuracy. The second time it is accurate only 30%. That means it only identified 30. The third time it is accurate 70%. That is variance. Very simple terms. They sound very, like scientific, but they're very simple. Learn these terms. These will help you a lot as you start managing these projects and programs and also using AI. So now let's talk about shifting gears towards PM of the future. And again, PMP is not equal to project management. Just PMP. That is the starting ground. You get Six Sigma as quality auditor, that's starting ground, but that is not the only place you need to be. Where I have seen, where did I grow and where did I see my peer project program managers did not grow was specifically around how I adopted myself beyond the core principles of project program management or the science behind it. And that's where we will talk about that how as AI is coming in, how you can start evolving your skills. So learn the technology, understand the data, have some subject matter expertise. These are three things that I would leave. That these will very big, become very important once you understand. And this is not just AI. If you want to be a very good project program management, let's say in construction, having some understanding of structural engineering will go a long way than a PM who is only focused on execution of the project and not beyond that. So as AI co-pilots and AI agents become much more, I would say, knowledgeable about project program management. So let me take a very simple scenario. Let's say today I do a startup and I take PMBOK, and I train an AI model on PMBOK. I can guarantee you it will do all the core project management tasks as good or maybe better than a typical project manager. That is the biggest risk of AI taking over project management role. And this is why I said, PMP is not equal to project manager, or just understanding the science behind project management is not enough anymore. It used to be, but not anymore. Because AI can do that. Today, the co-pilot, I don't know if we have turned it on, it can take it can take notes as I'm speaking and can summarize every meeting. With the co-pilot can automatically create and assign tasks and track them. There are predictions we can do. It can do what if analysis. It can generate reports automatically. I can literally create a presentation slide deck, PowerPoint slide deck using ChatGPT. So the tactical tasks, if you are stuck on tactical tasks, then you are at risk. But focus on what AI cannot do or technology cannot do in general, and you will never be, out of. You will never be replaced by technology. Okay. And where I think the PM should start focusing on, or PMOs, is on governance and regulation around ethics compliance, AI alignment, statutory compliance, data sources, handling of PII, personal identifiable information. This is like the names, addresses, phone number, emails, and all that. So there's a huge, huge shift going to happen and should happen, where I think the people who transition to that faster will become relevant and stay relevant for much longer than people who refuse that change. So governance is where I think all of us should start focusing and should become part of the, hopefully, PMBOK, that how to govern, AI itself. And there are a lot of this is a very evolving field. So that's why there you will not find a lot of data around it. But this is also where I write. If you visit my website, I write about. I've been writing about AI in the last 4 or 5 years. So since I pivoted to AI in 2018, and since then I've been writing blogs and I'm sharing ideas. How things can be done. So you know my website is there, but there are tons and tons of information. A lot of people are writing about it. So focus on that. How can you actually make sure that the if AI is going to be adopted in the organization, how can you make it reliable and governable? In a nutshell, will AI take my job away? If you are a PM who does not even want to learn AI as a tool, then I have bad news for you. It was very interesting. The last time I was visiting, Noida, I visit my mom, uh, twice a year, and there was one person, who were just came over to meet, and she was a developer. She is a developer, and she found out, oh, I work in AI, and she said, oh, I'm not going to touch AI, not at all. I was very surprised. I said, but that if you are just a coder, AI will write better code than you do today in less than a year. Today, as of today, I can use AI to generate simple programs. I don't need an entry level programmer. So the risk is for people who refuse to change. And that has been not just AI, that the same thing happened when, people the accountants who did not use calculators or Excel and all that, they became irrelevant. So if you learn how to use AI as a tool, then there are three paths that are I'm talking about in the next this thing. If you use it as a tool but still focus only on project coordination, you may survive for few years. But think about it. As I said, a startup comes up, trains the AI model or creates an AI model from ground up, trains it on PMBOK, and trains it on how to learn continuously based on every project execution, and becomes a platform that any company can hire a AI agent as a PM. Where do you think that human PMs will do? It's coordination. It's PMBOK. Yeah, it will do risk analysis. It will do all the project coordination tasks and all that, all the tactical things that we do today. So you can use AI as a tool, but don't stick to project coordination only. Where you start creating differentiation is soft skills. That's the first one. AI will never be able to replace soft skills, at least not in the next 5, 10 years. When I say soft skills, it's not the creation of presentation or drafting a communication email. These are tactical. I'm talking about presenting. I'm talking about influencing. I'm talking about managing the networking. So actually the soft skills that I discussed in the previous section. But where I think the PMs or those PMs have will never ever be replaced by technology, who actually go beyond both these skills and also spend effort in learning at least some technology or some subject matter expertise, no matter what industry you're in. You're in, textile, understand the yarn, what makes a difference, the dyeing process, how does it work? How would the transport, how would, let's say, the color of the yarn be impacted by the humidity of your workshop? These are common sense things. So I think that's where no technology can replace you if you focus on these three, building these three skill set. So I'm looking at the list of questions that were already submitted. I hope I answered most of them. I think the uh, even the quality auditor, I think yes, I answered. There was one that which are the managerial skills tasks most likely to be replaced by AI. This is interesting, very interesting question. My gut feel is that the biggest impact we will see is in HR and is in the first line management. When I say first line management is that where people are purely focused on resource management and not being a manager. And that's a very different topic altogether. But yes, there will be, see, almost all the roles will be impacted. The question is how and when, and the question is what can we do to preempt that. So that is the end of the slide deck, and I will leave this here and we can take questions.
Yeah, I'll go through a few questions which have been shared. So a few questions were related to how can the usage of AI be regulated, and how can I ensure my organization, which is using AI, when we develop something, it won't have an harmful effect on individuals or groups or violate human rights. So a question related to regulations.
Okay, so the first one was around uh, the use of AI in the
Usage
corporation.
of AI be regulated.
See, AI regulation, my personal opinion is that when the bureaucrats start regulating technology, it is more harmful than beneficial. My personal opinion. I hope that the bureaucracy and the politicians don't step in and the industry self regulates itself, but we don't know yet. EU has started coming out with regulations, but they are very rudimentary. So they are still focused on data, the factual versus misinformation. But it is a no-win game. It's very, very difficult to regulate a technology like AI. It's like saying, how will you regulate human beings? We have never been able to be regulated. You bring in a law, there are 10 people who will already find out loopholes and they will have a way out of the law. So you have to think, one thing you have to understand, AI is in our image. What we do is what AI will do. So if we cannot be regulated, it will be very difficult for us to regulate AI, which can scale 10 times faster and better than what we do. But as I discussed earlier, that if there are regulations, I think the regulation should be at the source. That be transparent around where does the data come from? Is it factual? Is it curated? It's a very interesting thing I should maybe share. I was consulting with Primer.ai and they build the AI platform for threat detection. This is a National Security Agency, NSA, White House funded program. And a couple of years ago, there was a terrorist attack in Vienna. And the police was able to apprehend the terrorist within 2 or 3 hours because they were using this company's platform, which predicted the next action of the terrorist. So think about the power behind that, right? But their platform also identifies misinformation and disinformation. The two different things. Misinformation is that I take a fact and then I speculate on top of it to create a narrative. That is misinformation. So, so let's say, there was and I think I also talk about it in my book, part of communication. Today, if you're sitting and you hear news as, that there was there's a blast in the restaurant. Though you hear the word blast and thing that comes to your mind is a terrorist attack or a bomb blast or something. So somebody can take that and now they can create a narrative, and that is misinformation. That it is building on a fact, but the fact may have been that it was a cylinder blast. But there was a blast in the restaurant is one sentence, and it builds on that the misinformation. Disinformation is that something that never happened and is what we call as rumor, or not even rumor. It's the disinformation that it never happened, but it was just generated. No blast happened, but it was something great. So their platform actually did that. So now regulating AI is extremely tough because you don't know whether it is misinformation, disinformation, whether it is something that the model may be hallucinating at the tail end. Although it was fed all the right information, but it was hallucinating. Similar to if, let's say, somebody catches you off guard and asks you a question, and you are suddenly thinking, okay, I think I heard that, I think, and you just blurt out some answer. That is nothing more than hallucination because one, you don't know whether it's a fact, and you don't know whether the information you're giving is accurate or not. So that's why regulating AI would be very tough, but there will be, regulation. I think the best would be the industry regulates itself. Long answer, but I wanted to cover the details.
Okay, I'll take up another one. How do we encourage employees to use AI for productivity purpose and not simply to take shortcuts? And if you can name some softwares in AI project management.
But isn't productivity taking shortcuts? Productivity is doing something faster than you would normally do. That is form of shortcut. So see, this is again the mindset. Why are you should be worried about how to use AI to get the fastest and the best results. I would rather, I tell my employees, the first thing I tell them that I don't focus on whether you work 8 hours a day or 8 minutes a day. You do not penalize people for being more productive and efficient. You challenge them. So I would rather say that if the team members are being super productive by using AI and taking shortcut, then tell them, okay, do more, or maybe contribute in some other area. Now, where shortcuts, if they are harmful, that means, if the term that you're using shortcut is that, hey, they are not focused on quality or they are not focused on, then yes, then that's a management and, a performance management issue, not an AI issue.
Yeah, actually, what happens very often is people use these tools for simplifying life without understanding and taking it actually further to improve. So that's probably what the person was referring to in this question.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
Yes.
We all do that all the time.
Okay, another question. This is if you have any examples of AI in construction projects, if you can share some example.
So AI in construction as of today, I would say there are not that many examples because construction is more towards, it's more of a, I would say, non-AI related tasks because there's a lot of structural engineering and a lot of other things, process engineering is involved. Where I think, the cross-industry AI involvement would be like co-pilots where in the line of business domain, like the sales and marketing of a construction company, or HR, or supply chain, or things like that. Construction in terms of creating blueprints and identifying risks and all that, I think we are far away from that. I have not seen any AI models that are focused on construction at the moment.
Yeah, I had asked about any leading softwares in AI project management that you can name here for the benefit of the audience. Then maybe they can explore.
No, I don't think that there is any. Uh, this evolved or this blasted on the, you know, in our universe like a year ago, year and a half ago. It's too early, but yes, a lot of things are happening. A lot of content is being created, and I'm sure that I think PMI itself is creating courses, AI for PMs. Uh, I have seen a couple of them. I don't know how good they are. Uh, Based on what I've heard, I'm very skeptical because I think the quality of the content will dictate a lot of how you understand this topic. And I would say that keep reading. You will see more material come out in the next 2 3 years than we have seen earlier.
In the interest of the time, I'll just take one last question, which has been posted recently. Which certifications to do to cover basics of AI for project managers for a career in AI world?
There is no certification right now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for very specific responses to all the queries. I'll hand over to Hiral for vote of thanks.
Yes. And feel free to send me the questions over email, and I can answer them over email, whichever are left. And then you can pass it on to the attendees. Thank you very much. I hope it was meaningful and you enjoyed the session.
Yeah.